Folks, I don't say things to hate. I don't say things to make people look dumb or want to minimize or one sees things. And the thing is that at times when you don't want to see things and they end up being shown to you, that's when denial sets in. And again, this is not the fans' fault, and I'm not blaming any fan for thinking, well, this guy, who is this guy to say things about the Mexican national team and stuff? Well, if you didn't learn by now, seeing how Mexico struggled to qualify in 2014, seeing how they got beat by Chile 7-0 in the Copa America, seeing the results that Mexico had post Germany in the 2018 World Cup, seeing the problems that they had in the 2022 World Cup, where they got knocked out for the first time in nearly 44 years in the group stage, and seeing how the U.S. are absolutely manhandling them over the past few years, something's wrong, right? Well, something has to be wrong. Someone has to say something. Now, I get it. And let me start here first because this was probably going to be the quickest one. Media. In Mexico, the media have told many of you for years, mind you, I worked it, so I know it, and I've heard it, that the Mexican national team is actually bigger than it is. Now is when things have to be rolled back because the results aren't accompanying, the players aren't there, they're being surpassed not only in all of America, but in CONCACAF. And that narrative no longer fits because they're being exposed each time they play outside of a certain little bubble that they have. It's great to be a big fish in a very tiny fish bowl, or maybe not. But it gets to a point where all of a sudden they go out in the ocean and they see that they can't swim that well, or they don't know how to search for food the way that the big sharks do. Media have a lot to do with this because they've sold a bill of goods for years. Mind you, look, I'll tell you one story. I was in 2007-8 working on a show. A lot of interviews and things of that nature, and at times I had to assist. Manolo Lapuente, former Mexican national team coach, was being interviewed. And there was one question that was asked. I don't exactly remember what it was, but the phrase completely just threw me off for a loop what he ends up saying. He ends up saying, yeah, we were one of the best teams ever in a World Cup. So much so that my 98 team, he was the coach of the 1998 World Cup team in France, was better than Argentina's 1986 side. Not my words, Manolo Lapuente. The 2006 World Cup, Mexican media were talking about how they should beat Argentina because Argentina didn't have any recent history. These were words that were used over on Mexican broadcasts. Of course, they face Argentina. Maxi Rodriguez ends up kicking them out. Keep in mind, Argentina have never lost to Mexico in a World Cup. But their biggest triumph has always, how we beat Brazil in the 1999 Confederations Cup. Yeah, you beat an Olympic side. Now, I said that when I was working at my former employer. You know, the green one that moved everybody to Mexico? Yeah, that one. And I got a lot of grief for it. Oh, yeah, because we beat a team that had Ronaldinho when Ronaldinho was 18, 19 years old. This was an Olympic side that was great, getting ready to play the following year in Sydney in 2000. Keep in mind that Brazil's first team was still playing the Copa America, which they won. And, of course, the following week, they ended up playing the Confederations Cup, which Mexico does win, yes. But they beat a Brazil B team. So all of these little things that have been told, all the hype that has been given, all this stuff that the media have given throughout in terms of making the national team bigger than it was, making it almost on par with Germany, making it on par with Mexico, making it on par with Argentina. The media, not the fans. Now, fans, I'm not getting with the fans yet. And not even with all the fans, with a group of fans. The media have built, or Mexican football media have created something that's really not true. It's always been an optical illusion what they've said about the Mexican national team. Because obviously being in CONCACAF and being sheltered within CONCACAF helps a great deal. You aren't exposed to getting beat down by Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, Germany, Spain, England, the Premier League, La Liga, whatever, on a consistent basis. So You're the big fish in a very tiny pond. Okay? You're the big fish in the aquarium, if you will. Now, when you go out into the ocean, that's a different story. Where there ends up being an intermingling of all of this, of course, is the man that runs the Mexican FA now, which is Juan Carlos Rodriguez. Juan Carlos Rodriguez, by trade, is a TV executive. So when TV people get into football, TV is given, or the commercialization of football is given more priority than the actual football itself. That's where the issue lies here. Therein lies the issue. Now, I'm not saying that a TV person is a bad thing to have. It's just that you need to also have football people that are in charge of football, not TV people in charge of football. I mean, you need to have the refrigerator in the kitchen, the toilet in the bathroom, the bed in the bedroom, if you kind of catch my drift. Everything has to be in the appropriate place. You can't have a scientist in charge of the cafeteria, you know? You can't have the economist in charge of the construction. You can't have the engineer in charge of the numbers, if just to give you another analogy. Everybody in their place. That's how things work. But when you start having people making decisions and things that they're not familiar with, that also reminds you of other confederations where people that are not qualified or aren't experts in a certain field getting involved. That's when bad decisions are made. And that has been the problem with Mexican football for the past few years. Rodriguez, in terms of the marketing, in terms of the money, in terms of the commercialization of El Tri, gotta hand it to him. There's been a lot of things. I mean, this is the man that invented or kind of conjured up the Copa America concept back in 2015, 2014, that ended up being the Copa America Centenario, okay? This is the man that has ran a television network, so he understands what the fans want or what the fans could want. So he knows that very well. In terms of how to have a team win or get to that fifth game, that's not his expertise. He can talk about it all he wants, but the structure of it, he has no clue. Two different things. Now, if you want a business person, do business. If you want a football person, have them do football. I reiterate. And that's been the problem because for years, and mind you, I've seen and I've been at Mexican national team press conferences. There's always the press conference. Then, of course, there's the media availability. And also the media go and take the players and do commercials. And they have a day which they go and do their commercials. And they go and do all the financial obligations that are required of them during their national team time. And the national team coach has to address the media. And then he has to go do commercials. And he has to go do certain things. And slowly but surely, you end up seeing the football aspect of it get relegated. And that is very common within Mexican football circles because you saw it a lot with the national team. It's common. It's not something that just happened now, that just because it happened a couple of times, now, no. This has been going on. This has been perpetual when it comes to the Mexican national team. So let's just keep that completely and utterly in mind. When you have that prioritization, the prioritization of money over football, and people, and I know many people that are marketing, oh, but if it weren't for us, then nobody would see. No, but if it weren't for the product, you have nothing to sell. It'll get to a point where if Mexico do not improve, if Mexico's quality continues to tank, if Mexico don't play well, if Mexico don't win, then what product do you have to sell? Because keep in mind, Mexico is one of those national teams that sells via nostalgia, that connection, that nexus that people have with their country. And it happens, of course, with Colombia. It happens with Argentina. It happens. That connection that you have with your country is part of your national team. At times, it's part of your team. Your club team also generates that reason why so many fans go to these friendlies. Whether some of the friendlies that sell the most in the U.S. are America, Chivas, Tigres, Monterrey. Those sell a bunch. That's why they come so often during FIFA breaks. And they bring their third and fourth team player. It doesn't matter. As long as they're wearing the jersey, doesn't matter. And it ends up being to a detriment because, and of course, the fans end up having to pay certain way. You know, they have their burden to bear there too. I'll mention that in a bit. I don't want to end up mixing a lot of things. The corporations have a lot to do with what has gone on because they end up worrying more about the brand than the actual product and the substance behind the product and the brand. Branding is great, but if your brand, if the substance behind the brand sucks, you get to a point people say, I don't want these headphones, I don't want these shoes, I don't want this, I don't want that. You know, it's great to be able to brand and market things, but what if the shirt that you wear falls apart? Or all of a sudden, I don't know, this black t-shirt I have, I put it in the laundry, and after the first wash, it ends up being light gray. There's no marketing in the world that can save that. Again, there's no marketing in the world that can save a team that's really going south. So there needs to be an improvement there, which I haven't seen. Jimmy Lozano is basically a byproduct of this. Yes, 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 yes. And a lot of the call-ups end up being, yes, I'll call him. Yes, because he has to. Yes, because... Now, notice, prior to Leo Messi coming to the United States, the most marketable player in the United States was Memo Ochoa. The most marketable footballer in the U.S. was Memo Ochoa. Now it's Leo Messi. When you have to deal with that, then, of course, having a top player that's playing well, and that's why everyone in the U.S. maybe isn't looking so much at Mexico. But Mexico, of course, because, what is it? Out of all the Latinos in the U.S., I think something like 70% are Mexican. Majority rules. But when you have a player of the ilk of Leo Messi, he ends up becoming way more marketable than basically the entire Mexican national team. Right now, you could say Leo Messi is more marketable than the entire Mexican national team for a whole cavalcade of reasons. But he's a winner. Mexico right now, they aren't. As much as it pains me to say it that way. They are the national team of the U.S. They are. They're the most popular national team, bar none. Just numbers alone show that. There's no denying that. But the most sellable team, the most marketable team in the U.S. now is Argentina. Because they're the world champions, because they have the best player in the world. They have the best player, arguably, of all time. Now, when he leaves, what ends up happening? I don't know. That's an interesting question, but that's another video we'd have to do someday. So for the most part, when we start seeing all these things really come to fruition, it was something that was bound to happen. And Jimmy Lozano is just a victim of that because he doesn't have much of a say in terms of who is and who isn't. He might have with certain players, but with others, well, maybe not. I mean, Memo Ochoa leaves because he knows that he needs to start exiting. But right now, do you think that there's anybody better than Memo Ochoa? I'm talking about with Mexico. I'm not talking about with clubs. Maybe Memo Ochoa is the one that has to come back. I don't know. He won't. He can't now. But keep in mind that there is no, I mean, and I said it before, there is no turnover with the Mexican national. There hasn't been. It's kind of being forced, but this is it. If you look at Liga MX, the stars, the players that make the difference on their teams, for the most part, they're all foreign. Very few are Mexican. Very few and far between. Henry Martin isn't on the national team either. There's a lot of things with Mexico that you have to keep analyzing and say, well, yeah, you know, the best Mexicans aren't on Chivas. And even the best Mexicans are overshadowed by the best foreigners, which is a very true reality. There's not much left to be said. But after all this is been discussed, there's still one thing. And all of this needs some sort of accountability. But Mexico doesn't have anyone to help be held accountable to, because there is an authority there that they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. Which leads me to the final point. The fans need to be held responsible too. Because for many years, Mexico played poorly. They still kept going. And you know what? It's commendable that they do, because they're supporting their national team. But it comes to a certain point where they've invested a great deal of money into something. And I'm talking about the good fans first. It's kind of cruel to go and criticize the good fans, because they're the ones that go in and they sweat their brow to go and take their families to go and sit down and to go and have a beer and to go and enjoy their team and to go and buy the merchandise and to go and invest heavily. And I say heavily because for a lot of people, it is a budget to go to a football match, and Mexican national team games aren't cheap. So props to them for investing, but there comes a time when you have to say, hey, by the way, no, I'm paying this much. The product can't be that. I don't care how nostalgic I feel. I don't care how much, I want to sing the anthem at the top of my lungs. This is unacceptable based on the amount of money you're charging me to go see these guys. Because there's been a certain point, and it happens with America, it happens with Chivas, it happens with Monterrey, that they bring their subs, because most of the starters for all those teams end up being away on international duty, and it's still a pretty penny to give. So you end up seeing third or fourth team players coming to the United States, and you all of a sudden are like, this isn't what I signed up for. But again, it pains me to go and say that, because the fans are the engine of this national team. They've been the grassroots of what kept it going for many years. And the popularity and the folklore and everything else that they bring forth. I'm talking about the positive folklore. Now, when it comes to the negative folklore, there's a lot of questions that you have to ask the fans, and there's a lot of questions that you have to ask Gianni Infantino as well. First and foremost, and of course I should have mentioned that the first question was going to be, well, why are Mexican teams still allowed to be owned by the same owner, 2 or 3 teams? Why is multi-property still a thing in Mexico? But that's another question. FIFA need to be asked. Gianni Infantino needs to be asked. Why do you keep giving Mexico a pass when it comes to the chant? Now, you can be against it or for it. It doesn't matter. We're not saying, this is not a question of morality or of you thinking something is right or wrong. It doesn't matter. We're talking about what it is, that you can't say it. You can't go yell it. And many times these types of things people do them and say them because of frustration, most of the time. Because when you hear Mexican League games and they start saying it, it's that their team's losing 2-0, and there's a sense of impotence from the fans. Yesterday was the same thing, getting blown out. I mean, just doors blown out, trunk just absolutely flying. I mean, the Lamborghini didn't have anything. The tires were blown out. The windows were blown out. They got blown out. And the fans had a sense of impotence, and they started screaming it. Is that the only recourse you have? The other one is get up and leave. And the third one after that is don't come back. And I'm not kicking you out. I'm saying leave and don't come back in a sense of protest because of the product that you're being given. I'm not saying get up and leave and don't come back as an insult. It isn't an insult in a way, because the fan feels insulted that this is the representation that's being shown in terms of a proud national team, a proud footballing culture. But fans get frustrated with that, but that doesn't make it justifiable to go and start yelling and screaming and then running onto the pitch, trying to end the match prematurely and trying to do all these things that if anyone else did them, FIFA would immediately fine them. There probably will be a fine, or there'll probably be some type of suspension. There'll be something, I don't know, or at least one expects that to be. But Mexico gets a pass time and 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 time again, until there gets to a certain point where, okay, how many chances do they get before they lose points? How many chances do they get before a game is forfeited? How many chances do they get until, hell, they even get their World Cup stripped? Because it's really strong talk to say it when it's not going on. But when shit hits the fan, what do you do if you're Gianni Infantino? And what do you do if you're a media member and you have Gianni Infantino in front of you? You have to ask him. I wish I would get close enough to ask him, because I sure as hell would. Someone has to. Someone has to keep these people accountable. And that's the problem. And again, I circulate back around to where I started. The people that can ask the questions usually don't. Or they try and end up, deaf ear, blind eye. Oh, that didn't happen. It's not going on. Because there's a lot of games that I've done commentary on. And I hear it. And the referee just keeps going. It's like, man, I don't want any problems. I just want oh my God, 90 minutes can't come soon enough. Oh, please, 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 let's go. Oh my God, don't send another, don't put me in a situation, don't put us in a situation where it's going to happen. Please keep the game flowing. Please keep the game moving. Don't send it out for a goal kick. Da-da-da-da-da. That's me being real. So, when's it going to happen? Because it's not everybody, but there's a lot of them. People say, you generalize, Juan, you generalize. No. Oh my God, don't paint everybody with such a big, trust me. Sometimes it's not generalizing either. It's just that there's a lot of them that don't, and there's a lot that do. But we're talking about this compared to this. Something like this compared to something like this. These are the ones that don't. These are the ones that do. Within that little Venn diagram, if you will. And sometimes knowing how many do, sometimes I don't have a big enough paintbrush. Sometimes I need a roller. But that's not generalizing, because there's a lot of them that don't. Unfairly, they get bunched in with those that do. So when's that going to happen? Because Mexico need accountability. And when that accountability finally does come, maybe, just maybe, things will start changing. Folks, I'll talk to you soon. Until next time.